Hey, Richard.
Yeah, buddy.
Guess what time it is now?
Time to get out of the cold and hit Orlando for Dev Intersection?
What? Yeah, that's right. March 25th to 28th at the Swan Hotel in Orlando for another great Dev Intersection. All your favorites are going to be there, including Scott Guthrie and Scott Hanselman.
Ah, the greater and lesser Scott.
Yes.
And if sequel is your thing, Paul Randall and Kim Tripp are, as usual, running an awesome set of sequel sessions.
And this year at Dev Intersection, we have a special emphasis on new artificial intelligence technologies, including deep learning, cognitive services, and more.
And, of course, all the latest web tech, Angular, C#, Visual Studio, all your favorites.
So go to devint.netrocks.com right now and register. Sign up for a workshop as well, and you'll get some cool hardware.
We'll see you there.
Hey, London! It's .NET Rocks!
The miming of beating people with chairs is very effective. I like that a lot. Yeah.
It works well. It gets them all rowdy.
Yeah.
Londoners don't need encouragement, though.
No,
This is
they're all
bunch.
a pretty rowdy bunch, actually.
Absolutely. You guys are awesome. Rowdy.
Yeah.
Little late, but delayed response.
If we said Man City rocks, what would happen?
Oh no!
Oh, see, instant violence, just like that.
So welcome to .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin. This is Richard Campbell, our guest Bill Wagner, and John Skeet. You probably know who they are, so I won't need to introduce them. But we do have this thing that we do at the beginning of the show. It's called Better Know a Framework. So roll that music.
All right, buddy, what do you got?
Well, earlier in the week, as in yesterday, but I'm talking about for the listener, this is probably a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
We were talking about blockchain and Bitcoin and all of these things, right?
Jennifer Wodello was talking about wanting to buy some Bitcoin processors.
Right. And seems to be a consensus that nobody really needs blockchain developers. You don't need any blockchain in your application. That would be a bad idea. However, Business Insider seems to think that there's a growing list of applications and use cases of blockchain technology in business and life. And I'll read what you can read on the details at this link here.
Sure.
So in banking and finance, international payments, capital markets, trade finance, regulatory compliance and audit, because of the secure nature of blockchain, be rather useful for accounting and audit. Money laundering protection, not one that really
seems to be working all that well right now.
It seems to be the opposite, doesn't it? The money laundering. But so I'm not really sure how they're coming up with these things. But insurance, peer-to-peer transactions, in business, supply chain management, healthcare, real estate, media, energy, in government, record management. Government record management and government.
You mean they manage records?
I don't
I'm
even
talking
think
about the United States. I'm not said.
I mean, I can
else.
only speak for my stupid country. Hey, it's easy. Identity management, voting, taxes, nonprofit agencies, legislation, compliance, regulatory oversight, and in other industries, financial management and accounting, shareholder voting, record management, cybersecurity, big data, data storage, Internet of Things. Voting, did I say voting? Yeah.
You said voting, yeah.
So they really think that this stuff is going to explode. And apparently there's been a lot of hiring of quote-unquote blockchain developers, people that can actually write code against blockchain, not necessarily for Bitcoin, but just to do the computations.
You have
and
an
the ledgers and all
algorithmically
that.
driven, publicly visible, if anonymized transactional record.
That's right.
All right.
Yeah. So, it's interesting read.
Well, I'm certainly on my radar for doing shows around, but I really want to wait until there's some better dev kits, some SDKs and stuff around it, so we really have some place for people to go.
That's pretty smart.
That's what I'm thinking.
So who's talking to us, buddy?
Grabbed a comment off of show 1479, the one we did with Mr. Skeet back in September of 2017. We were talking about .NET Diagnostics. I think that was at the Skills Matter show.
Yep.
Had a lot of fun in that conversation. But John being John, we ended up talking actually a lot about inclusion.
Yeah.
And
Better than I thought.
No, dude, I'm going to make fun of you later. Okay, First, I'm going to say something nice to you to get you off your guard. Then I'm going to beat you up. Like, there's a pattern here. But this comment comes from Kudos, and I don't know that I'm pronouncing her name correctly, but she's from Pakistan, and she says, as always, great episode and love listening to John Skeet. In the mid-90s in Pakistan, I was trying to figure out what to do with my life, and somehow, totally coincidentally, I ended up in the computer science degree program. I had never owned a computer or a gaming computer before that. I was anything but a geek. Somehow, I still fell in love with programming and the field as a whole. Today, I still spend most of my time coding. That last bit about empathy and respect and inclusiveness, this is your words, my friend, really hit home with me on a totally different angle. Everywhere I went, and this is, I think, after she's involved in software development, everywhere I went, geeks love Star Wars, Star Trek, and Lego. Look, you can't love Star Wars and Star Trek at the same time. There's basic rules here.
Actually, you can, I think.
All the references seemed like inside jokes to me. I understood tech, but I felt like an outsider. Until only a few years ago, I felt very insecure about this and would not write a comment like I am writing here today now, which I'm flattered by that you would write on our website.
Did she use the Force or teleport?
I don't think she did either one, especially.
Okay.
The point raised by Skeet about women in tech is much bigger than what I have experienced, but it's all the little things that we do, the little assumptions that we make that can push others away and that we all need to do a better job of observing. Thank you for being vocal about it, Mr. Skeet.
Cool. And on that Star Wars and Star Trek front, I know there are studies around workplace and what you do in your workplace. And if your workplace is covered in posters and models and things that you think are just kind of fun, and all about Star Trek, for example.
Right.
And if someone comes in and they're not a Star Trek fan, they don't think, oh, this person likes Star Trek. They think, this isn't a space where I'm welcome.
Right. This isn't for me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's all unconscious. It's not that someone's saying, we only want Star Trek fans in our team.
Right.
It's just that's the message that is unconsciously and entirely accidentally. No one wants to give that. I doubt that anyone. Hands up if you want your team to only be Star Trek fans or Star Wars fans.
There's a few cultists in this room.
What if you're actually that kind of guy? That kind of place. We are a Star Trek.
Then there are other issues, I would say.
Now, I'm coming at this from a team management perspective, and I would never suppress anybody's desire to decorate their workspace the way they want to. But I think what you're describing also is at a point where we simply say, this is the room. That I would argue I'd want each person's space to be decorated a little bit differently so that it showed a diversity rather than a homogeny.
Right, which is good if you've got a diversity.
Yeah.
If you have a team that all like the same thing, then you end up with
don't be surprised that you have a hard time finding anything else.
Yeah. And this is one of the good things about working from home. You can decorate your home office however you like, and no one will ever know.
Well, it all depends on what you wear when you head out of the house.
Has Holly seen the shed? Are you sure about that?
Hey, no inside jokes over here.
Nice.
Right. So yeah, I work from home in my shed, and my shed has a surround sound system, an ice cream maker, a Miro print, and these are probably not things that you get in the everyday shed.
When you say shed, what
There's a picture
exactly
on a
are you
blog post
talking
somewhere.
about? Like a tin shed, kind of?
No, so it's a garden building that is separated into two halves. There's one half has like the lawnmower and stuff in. The other is really a home office.
It's a tiny house.
And it's
So let me close this up by saying kudos. Thank you so much for your comment. It was a pleasure to read it, and I'd love to send you a .NET Rocks mug. And if you'd like a .NET Rocks mug, write a comment on the website at .NETRocks.com or via any of our social media, because we publish our show to Google Plus and Facebook. And if you comment there and we read it on the show, we'll send you a mug.
And definitely follow us on Twitter. I'm at Carl Franklin. He's at Rich Campbell. Send us a tweet. We power our warp drives with them.
Nice. They look like dilithium crystals.
Sorry. Very sorry. All right, guys, should we have a talk about something?
Do you need
or
to
other?
introduce these two? I don't think we do.
I don't really think.
No,
Does anybody not know who either of these guys are? Bill Wagner?
Did I title the session correctly? Two nice C# people.
I like that.
Yeah.
We'll find
because
out.
so often when you have a two-person panel, it's supposed to be confrontational.
Right.
And I can't imagine squeezing a confrontation out of you unless you put John in the front row. Then we get a confrontation.
I mean, I suppose we should just say John works for Google, and in the C# on the Google Cloud Platform area, he's been a C# fan. He's probably the #1 contributor to Stack Overflow.
Not probably. He's the first person in the history of man to exceed 1 million reputation points. And the next one down's not even close. Like, you now have the billionaires problem. You're going to make money faster than anybody else make money. There's nothing you can do
Not
from here on
quite
out.
true.
We can kill you now.
So I do hit the rep cap. So I now answer only 1 or 2 questions a day generally. I spend much more of my time. I spend loads of time on Stack Overflow, but mostly adding comments saying, could you clarify your question? And, here's the ways to do it.
Right.
But in fact, just before coming up to this level, I was on Stack Overflow where someone had said, who's the person who in the blog post graph that Stack Overflow posted, it showed someone else, Gordon Linoff, has answered more questions.
Yeah.
Well, very linear.
Yeah.
And, still basically answering the same number of questions every day as he did a few years ago, mostly on SQL, I think.
Yeah.
And the question was, when will they overtake John? And the answer is they're about 350,000 behind at the moment.
Amir.
And they're gaining at about 50,000 a year. Which is very significant because basically we both hit the rep cap every day, or I'm not sure that Gordon actually hits the rep cap from votes every day, but gets loads of accepted answers.
Okay.
Right.
Whereas I hit the rep cap, I've hit the rep cap every day since June 2010.
Okay. As you do. They put the rep cap inside the documentation was for John Skeet.
Well, it really is at this stage. If you, I asked a question on Stack Overflow saying, isn't it a bit coincidental that before we knew what rep would be like, in the first months of Stack Overflow, the rep cap was set to 200 a day, sounds a nice round number. What are the chances that we got that right?
Yeah.
And that all the rules were right? Shouldn't we have a look at various tweaks? Maybe you should stop getting rep after a certain number of votes or after a certain amount of time. And various people played with various ways of tweaking the rep cap. And pretty much whatever you did helped me and hurt other people.
Everybody else.
Jeff Atwood's called it the John Skeet tax.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is.
Let's talk about Bill Wagner for a minute. Bill's been a C# author and developer for many, many years.
Effective C#.
Consultancy, best-selling book. I was a regional director and then joined the Borg. I'm sorry, did I make another Star Trek reference? So he now works on the .NET Core content team, right? Doing the best documentation ever done in the history of software, I think.
We try.
No, you succeed.
Yeah,
it's
extraordinary.
Amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. So we thought we'd geek out on a little C#.
Isn't C# done? Can I lead off there with...
After Rosalind, where do you go?
Yeah.
Where do we go? Okay, so... No, it's not done.
Otherwise, you're out of a job.
Oh, you have no idea how big the backlog is.
Yeah, I bet.
So a lot of the things that we're seeing that we're putting into C# and the team is looking at come from a couple different places. And you've had Mads on here talking about language design and looking at it.
Absolutely.
And if you look at C#, it was first being designed late 90s, early 2000s, first shipped in 2002. We built programs using objects. That was the way, right?
It was very didn't have a choice. The thing's objects all the way down.
Yeah, so it's objects all the way down. That object orientation is in its DNA. And that's not really how we build programs now.
I don't disagree.
Right.
And I think it's a really interesting point that we've kind of stepped away from these typical rules of object orientation.
Now, there are still a lot of areas where object orientation makes sense, but there are a lot of places where it doesn't. So with a lot of the features that we're adding in C#, it's how does C# stay really relevant in this world where now we're separating data and the functions that act on that data instead of putting them together in an object. And yet still it has that object-oriented DNA. We can't just get rid of it and throw it away, right? So how do we live in this world where things are now very different? Data's stored over here, we manipulate it over there, we send it to another machine, we hydrate it, send it off REST calls and so on. And we work with different languages in different parts of the program, right?
Which also I don't find anomalous.
No.
In the sense that we've always had SQL in the back end
Right.
and some other front-end language.
So we're looking at a lot of features into how does it stay relevant and stay a first-class language in today's world.
Yeah.
In my deck and in Mads, we have these 2 slides that show the most popular technologies, most loved technologies. And C# is one of 3 things that are on both slides.
Right.
The other 2 are TypeScript and Python. And how do we stay on both slides? We really want to do that. The other thing you're seeing a lot of good ideas come from is the C# team now in a post-Roslyn world. They're now working in C# every day. In the pre-Roslyn world, they're writing C++ in their day jobs, coming up with what would be cool for C#. But they weren't using it every day, all the time. Now, the C# team is writing in C#, and they're using it all the time. They're going, wouldn't it be cool if?
Yeah.
And then they just make it happen. And we start prototyping and looking at it, and then going through language
Is it a
design.
common occurrence that you guys are sitting around, looking through the backlog and just some random comment in GitHub or something about a suggestion that nobody had thought of, like nobody? Or are the good ideas typically popular by the time you get around to?
I've usually blogged a request ages ago.
That's right. Have there been anything like that oh, wow, I didn't think of that. I mean, being John Skeet, had you not considered something
one of my great experiences was at NDC Oslo many years ago. Eric Lippert was there, Neil Gafter was there, relatively new to the C# team at the time, and Mads Torgersen was there. And Mads did a talk on C# 4, followed by me doing a talk on If I Ruled the World, C# 5 according to John.
Nice.
In front of the actual C# team. It's like,
oh, wow.
Followed by a panel discussion like this.
Okay.
With the 3 of them and me feeling sort of out of my depth by a long way. And none of what I asked for was in C# 5. And when I saw C# 5, it's like, thank goodness they did that instead.
Wow.
Because I would never have thought of async. It's sort of Blood's paradox of you don't see your own restrictions, and it takes real genius to say, there is this thing that no one's done before. I know async kind of things have been done in F# before, but other aspects that no one's done before, someone's got to think of it first.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely nowhere near there, but I can think of little ideas. So, I have one feature request, which is we have various things that end in a question mark now. Why can't we have return question mark? So a binary operator or statement. So return question mark, condition, expression, which means if this condition is true, return the value of that expression. Otherwise, just go on to the next line. So that we don't have one of the most common forms of if statement is if this condition, return a value.
Yes.
If this condition, return a value.
Yeah.
And just like I'd always joked that it would be nice to have an as if expression, which is if x as int I. And now, of course, we have that with pattern matching.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that maybe the return question mark, maybe return will get some traction. Who knows?
Interesting.
You could implement it. I mean, the whole thing's open source now. You could just sit down
if
and
I
run
had
it.
an infinite amount of time.
Yeah.
You stop answering all those Stack Overflow questions, John.
And we do actually get that. One of the ones in C# 7, I think, is when it came out, was implemented entirely by the community, proposed and implemented by the community.
Wow.
In C# 6, we had expression-bodied members, but there were some places they weren't allowed, like constructors, I think was one. You'll remember exactly what it is. Property setters and getters.
Or any property that had both get and set. You couldn't have both.
And that people in the community said, why not? And then went and implemented it as expression body members, finalizers, constructors, property getters, and setters. Proposed by the community, approved by the language design team, PR written, boom.
Nice.
It's really cool.
Yeah, that's got to be a day that the team opened a bottle of champagne or something too. When a significant feature gets implemented by somebody that's not on the team.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic.
But in terms of how far C# can still go, this is a question that worries me quite a bit. For a start, much as I enjoy writing about C#, I would quite like to have the final edition of C# in depth at some point, and then maybe get around to writing something else. At the moment, every couple of years, I'm going to have to spend a year writing the next edition. And at the moment, I can't even know when I'm going to be done with the current edition, because I'm trying to cover all of 7 Star, and they keep bringing out new versions.
Sure.
Yeah.
You'll only know for sure when they start working on 8.
But they started working on 8, but they're not going to release 8 for quite a while.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, it's just 7.3. Just some
It's just some stuff.
Just some stuff.
Just a little bit.
But I have serious concerns around how large the language can grow.
Right.
Because if you are starting C# today, you've got a big, big hill to climb.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, much
And,
larger than
it will only get bigger. And at what point, what interests me as much as what would the team like to go back and change is if you were starting from a blank slate now,
what would
both with language and if you really had magic dust and could say, and we'll have a new VM at this point as well,
right,
that could do it's blank slate. How different would it be, and how much will that perfect language, well, as perfect as we could imagine now, diverge from where C# goes because of legacy?
Some would say you'd end up at F#.
Will there ever be a C# light?
Wow.
By that I mean,
I don't think so.
It's going to be a new language.
Like a core.
Yeah, I think that would be hard. There's billions of lines of C# code in the world.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's broke now. No, that's not going to happen.
My favorite example of something that the team decided not to break is effectively a bug in the C# compiler in that it violates the spec. That you can have const double 0 equals 0.0. And then you can have enum foo with some enum values. And then you can do foo x equals and then your double constant.
We made a promise on the show we would never read code on the air. But that was 14 years ago. 15 years ago. But guys, hold that thought just for a minute while we pause for this very important message. When you're building an application, you need it to be fast, secure, and always evolving. With Kubernetes Engine on the Google Cloud Platform, developers can deploy fully managed, containerized apps quickly and easily. Google has been running production workloads in containers for over 15 years, and they build the best of what they learn into Kubernetes, the industry-leading open-source container orchestrator. Kubernetes Engine combines automatic scaling, updates, and reliable self-healing infrastructure with open-source flexibility to cut down development cycles and speed up time to market. Learn more about Kubernetes Engine online at g.co/getgke. That's g.co/getgke. And we're back. You're listening to .NET Rocks. We're live in London. Carl Franklin, Richard Campbell, Bill Wagner, and John Skeet. We're talking, is it possible that C# could ever get too big?
Yes. So here's one of the things that I do. So my job is basically explaining what the team comes up with, writing all the docs for that. And one of the things I do with new features, I sit down with the team. It's usually Julien Calvert, and we go over the features. And one of the things that I want to be able to say about any new feature is, okay, so here's what it does. And it works pretty much the way you'd think it would. And then I can go into all the details about how that works. And then at the end I can go, see, it's pretty much what you think it would.
Yeah.
And the more those details are something different than pretty much how you think it would, those are warning signs that now we're getting complicated.
But who is that you that you think it would? And is it someone with decades of experience and of other languages and stuff, or is it someone who's learning C# maybe as their first language?
A little bit of both, right? Because you're seeing these tokens, you're seeing these things that look like symbols. It's no surprise that the symbols we use in any programming language are somewhat similar or analogous to mathematical symbols, right? Because people are familiar with those. So we have this thing that's already there, and you kind of squint and it looks about right. And a couple of the ones that are really interesting that are historical, like when we added discards to tuples. So you can declare an underscore where a tuple goes, and then we throw that away, and we don't even assign it to anything, and it's not a variable. You can't look at it.
And you can have two discards.
You can have two discards
both with underscores, whereas you can't assign values to the same other variable.
So effectively,
you can't
what
have
this
three
means,
discards, then you should have folded.
Right?
Oh, wait,
that's a different
Texas Hold'em.
Right. So effectively, what it means is this routine returns 3 or 4 things, and I only want 1 or 2 of them, and I'm throwing the rest away. And when designing the feature and getting feedback, there were people who were saying that underscore is too small. I can't see it. I want something bigger and more expressive.
More obvious.
And Neil Gafter had this absolutely perfect answer to this. He goes, "You want that right now because of what you're thinking. It's a new feature, and you want it to stand out.
Right. But a year from now,
after you use it for a week or 2, you don't want to see it. So it's this trick with a mature language of getting something that looks different enough that you see it differently, but then it folds right into the vocabulary that you already have.
And that's a sign of Neil's experience, too. He's been through this a few times.
Yes.
Another great example of that, about how things change, when I wrote the, I think, first edition of C# in depth, I was saying about var, use it really carefully and be very deliberate about where you use var. I hardly ever use var apart from for link expressions or whatever. Is anyone else in that, you were really tentative about using var? I use it everywhere now. I'm not quite everywhere.
Have you just gotten reckless in your old age now? Is that what it is? Does a million rep points make you crazy? Is that what this is?
It's also reminds me of Java and checked exceptions. I felt very nervous when I came to C#. It's like, there are no checked exceptions. My code's going to be awful everywhere and break everywhere.
What's a checked exception, John?
So checked exception is where the compiler, there are some exceptions in Java that are checked and some that are unchecked. And if you've got to declare that your method might throw a checked exception, otherwise you can't throw it. And if someone is calling your method, then they've got to either catch that exception or declare that they might throw it as well. So
otherwise, it won't compile. Is that the idea?
So it's not just a comment saying this method can throw these exceptions. It's enforced by the compiler.
It's an assertion, essentially.
Maybe. I'm not sure.
Well, maybe. I don't know.
But anyway, I felt safe in this, this seatbelt of
but
checked
it was
exceptions.
fake. It was fake. It was an illusion. It didn't work.
Right. It was an experiment in Java, effectively.
Lies told to children.
But
just declare your exceptions. It'll be safe.
Fun and profit.
Null reference exception.
And it's still a raging argument in the Java community whether it was a mistake or not.
Right.
And certainly last time I used Hibernate, which must have been 10 years or more ago, most Hibernate exceptions were unchecked ones, so they extended runtime exception. And that was deemed fine, and it turned out that worked okay. But I was really nervous to start with. And now it feels like not having checked exceptions in the Java style was fine. I think we need better error handling, but I don't know what it is.
Right.
Bob's paradox again.
Yeah.
But I feel very much the same way about var. I felt uncomfortable, so I was quite nervous about using it. And it turns out that the things I was nervous about aren't problems. I'm still somewhat cautious if I think it aids the readability, particularly if I've got a method that's longer than I would like it to be. Or an expression that's not as obvious as I'd like it to be, then sure, use an explicit type. But a lot of the time, var.
Whatever.
Yeah,
not that big a deal.
What do you guys think of Poly for handling transient errors?
I like it. I think there are a lot of really, really good patterns for handling errors, especially in distributed systems, implemented in Poly. So Poly's a open source project. Carl's company's involved in it, Dylan Reisenberger and a number of people there. It's got circuit breakers that reset.
That's right. Try and wait and retry, forever with a
back
number,
off on retries.
Exponential.
I think it implements a lot of really good patterns, especially for distributed microservice systems. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, it's good. And there's a rumor that the guys on the .NET Core team are thinking of rolling it in somehow.
I don't know.
They're talking about it. I know that. Yeah. And I don't think I'm breaking any rules by saying that. I think they're talking about it.
Okay.
We'll find out in a few days.
We'll find out.
There's probably a GitHub issue that would track it if it is.
It's another sort of interesting reality that doesn't seem like there's actually any secrets left. Because in reality, if you go read through the notes on GitHub, every idea, every conversation, every debate, it's actually public. It's just that most people don't read them.
There's That's been fun, and there's some really interesting things there. Is that Mads is officially keeper of the language design meeting notes, and is very careful to put those out publicly, but without any names attached to them.
Interesting.
So all the opinions are there, but it doesn't say who said what. It just says
it
that's
becomes
how it
the
was
opinion
discussed.
of the room
Right.
rather than the opinion of individuals.
Or several opinions of the room, but not of a particular individual.
But the discussion's more important than the identities.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's not all the discussion either. So we have the same sort of how public do we want to be for the ECMA standardization? We use GitHub issues for that. We have hundreds of issues. And currently that's private, even though the standard is public. And we have talked about, well, we could open it up, read-only, etc. And we thought that to avoid chilling effects of someone... I've written a bunch of stupid things in there. It's like, well, why doesn't this work? Oh, because of... It's usually Neil. Neil is fantastic at, I will say something stupid, and Neil will come back very politely and say,
I thought you said
well, here is the counterexample to your suggestion, John.
Right.
So we don't want a chilling effect. And Mads taking a time, he doesn't publish the notes immediately either. It's not like he drafts them during the meeting anonymously and then immediately publishes them. Takes a little while so that the important things rise to the surface of his mind.
Right.
Apologies, Mads, if I'm misrepresenting you here, but I think this is what I remember him saying when we discussed this for a little while, because I found it a very interesting process to get all the good things of public debate and public awareness of reasons behind the decisions that are made without any stifling of discussion and debate.
Yeah, that's good.
Right. And sort of avoiding the political pressures around that.
Yeah.
That certain names and weights and things cause.
Oh, yeah.
That's very thoughtful.
Yeah.
It's Mads. Of course it's
Yeah, of
thoughtful.
course.
It's very thoughtful, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Richard.
Yeah, buddy.
Hey, guess what time it is now?
It must be that happy time again.
Yeah, it's time to suggest a new language, a dumbed-down version of C# as we were talking about, with all just the features that John Skeet wants. It's called C dull. C flat? No, C dull, I think. Either way, it's not funny. Oh my God, I've never heard crickets like that before in my life.
You die better than anybody I know.
And there are millions of people in this room.
I know, millions. It's actually time to give away a D-Experience subscription to one lucky member of the .NET Rocks fan club. Become a UI superhero with DevExpress UI controls and libraries and deliver elegant .NET solutions that address customer needs today and leverage your existing knowledge to build next-generation touch-enabled solutions for tomorrow. Whether it's an Office-inspired application or a data-centric analytics dashboard, DevExpress Universal ships with everything you'll need to build your best without limits or compromise. And check out their DevExtreme React Grid, built from the ground up to fully support all the cool features that come with React, like the virtual DOM and state controllers like Redux. It supports master detail, sorting, grouping, paging, and editing. You can check it out and test it for free on GitHub. But learn more and download your free 30-day trial of DevExpress Universal at devexpress.com/superhero.
Well, all right, buddy. Who's our winner?
Today's winner, Richard, is Mark Broadhurst.
Congratulations, Mark.
Let's give him a round of applause.
Golf claps. Big claps.
Big round of applause. And Mark just won the D-Experience subscription. That's a big pile of awesome for my friends over at DevExpress, just for being a member of the .NET Rocks fan club. And if you want to know what that is, go to .NETRocks.com, click on the big Get Free Stuff button, answer a few questions, and join the fan club. We have thousands of members all over the world, and every show we like to give away stuff from our sponsors. And every December, we give away a $5,000 technology shopping spree to one lucky member picked at random. But you got to sign up to win. All right, guys, it's been a while since we asked you this, at least a month or two.
Yeah, it was last September, I think, in my case.
Yep.
So if you had $5,000 to spend on technology, what would you buy?
After you, Bill.
Oh, gee, thanks. I was about to say the same thing.
Nice.
Jeez. I really want to get a drone to kind of fly over and see what's
DJI
going on
Phantom.
there.
Because you're up in Maine now.
Yeah, so we're up on a river water around. I want to be able to get up
ocean's
and
not
see.
far from you either.
Nope, the ocean's about a quarter mile. We don't have sight lines there, so getting out to the ocean would be hard.
Yeah, you can get the goggles too. You got $5,000 to spend. We can get the full remote rig going for you. I'll tell you, I've been flying. I've got the Coast Place now. I've been flying my Mavic Pro, and looking down on the sea life is dramatically different. You can see a lot more information. And if you screw up, you get to buy a new drone.
That's right.
Being up in Maine, you could torture the tourists with something like that. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. How about you, John?
So I didn't get to go to Scott Huntsman's talk this morning about building a Kubernetes cluster of Raspberry Pis. But we were talking afterwards about, that sounds quite fun, but I quite like a slightly bigger Kubernetes cluster of Intel NUCs. I have a couple of Intel NUCs at home for benchmarking node time, because at the moment I'm not quite convinced, and I need to actually test this. I'm sort of paranoid at the moment. If I do benchmarking in the cloud, will that provide stable results, or will there be noisy neighbor issues? And, we've upgraded all the CPUs. Oh, none of your benchmarks are worth anything anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it must be hard if you have a bunch of NUCs to test node time that you actually have to fly them to different time zones in order to test them.
But NUCs run, $500 to $700 a shot. So
Right.
You're not going to get
So
that
if you
many of them.
build a Kubernetes cluster of sort of 6 or 7 of them,
Yeah.
that can start sucking up things.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So that'd be quite fun.
And you can heat a room too.
Well, it's quite handy that my shed, being a shed, I have a couple of NUCs and a Mac Mini and old laptops that aren't actually on, but certainly you can notice, I'm sure it doesn't get as cold as it would if those weren't running.
Yes.
And definitely if I've got 2 laptops, so work laptop and personal laptop running all day, I'm pretty sure that pumps out a significant amount of heat.
If it's not warm enough, you could run some SETI at home work units.
Yeah. Get those CPUs pinned for 15, 20 minutes and warm that place right up.
Yeah.
Or just pull up Chrome.
Oh.
Did you say that out loud? You
Cheap
shouldn't have
shot.
said that out
Cheap
loud.
shot.
That's not right.
That's not right. So let's talk C# some more. What are you guys at Google doing with C#?
So we're still making Google Cloud Platform rock for C# developers. So at the moment, focusing on ASP.NET Core applications, making them run beautifully on App Engine Flexible environment and the Kubernetes engine, what used to be called Container Engine. And I work on the API client libraries. So we have Vision APIs and Speech APIs, and there's Firestore coming and all kinds of things. And I try to make that as pleasant an experience as it possibly can be. The idea is to give the illusion that I have handwritten all the libraries for all the APIs. In reality, there's a lot of generated code behind the scenes that we've thought very carefully about how we can generate things. And then we've designed it so that we can tweak things only additively. Partial classes are fantastic for this.
Yeah,
but if we've got, if I've got a protocol buffer class, generated class for an image for the Vision API, I can just add some static methods to that to say, create me an image that represents this URI, or fetch it from a URI and get the actual bytes.
Yeah.
And it can be just much, much nicer to use than if we only had the generated code.
Yeah. Well, it's good stuff. I've used it myself and love it. You guys are doing great things with it. Yeah.
What is the underlying language of a lot of those APIs? Is it more of a
Java shop? It's protobuf. It's described as a protobuf gRPC service.
Right.
So it goes through an extra level of configuration saying, hey, this RPC over here, even though it's just an RPC and it has a request and a response, it's actually listing resources, and it's got page tokens, and you can get the first 10 and then ask for the next 10, etc. And we say, okay, well, now that you've told us that's a list of resources, we'll just generate code so that you can iterate over it transparently, or you can get it a page at a time with a certain size, or whatever you want to do with that. But the idea is it should be easier to use than if you're using the raw RPCs.
Sure. And friendly to the C# typeset and
exactly. Yeah.
Well, I was blown away when I got this Chrome plugin app, or a Chrome app, I guess, called Voice Memo, something like that. And it's essentially you just turn it on and start talking to it, and it did the best job of recognizing speech without any training of any technology that I ever used. That's really great. Yeah.
Nice.
I did get results. Yeah, okay, you can clap. Good. I did get similar results after with Microsoft speech recognition just on the client, because you're sending stuff up to the cloud and using the power of Google to translate that stuff in real time. But I had to train it. I had to train Microsoft's thing. And after I trained it for a while and went through the speaking exercises, the accuracy really improved. But it was just great to just pull this thing up right out of the box. It reminded me of Battlestar Galactica, which is the first time I ever saw, Commander Adama talking to the thing, and it was typing away, and I thought, oh my God, that's so cool.
Right.
Wouldn't that be great?
That's the old Battlestar.
Yeah, the first one.
The 80 Battlestars. When Dirk Benedict had hair.
That's right. Yeah.
Have you seen the Starbuck and Starbuck in Starbucks photo? It's awesome.
I haven't, but I know what it is now, and it makes me happy that it exists.
Makes me happy that it exists.
That's
put a link to it on the show notes.
I will.
More inside jokes. Sorry for not being inclusive.
Katie Stockoff is awesome.
Oh, that brought the conversation.
You're the one that mentioned Battlestar Galactica.
That's true.
I know,
and then I ran with it. I blame myself. One of the thoughts I'd had around C# being open source is that we could get to a place where the bulk of the community just doesn't want any more features, that we could declare done. Something I felt like Microsoft could never do. As long as it was closed source internal, if you didn't ship a new version, the product is dead. But if you put it out in the wild, you put it out in the world, and we agree that this is where we want it to be, then it's not dead. It's right.
That's an interesting question.
Interesting, encouraging, and scary all at the same time.
I'm not sure whether being open source is necessary for that. Is it just psychologically?
I think it's completely psychological.
Yeah, and so there's 2 or 3 different points I really want to address there. Mm-hmm. The first one is with any of the projects that go into the .NET Foundation, from inside Microsoft or from community that wants to put it into the .NET Foundation. Sure. It goes through the advisory council and the board, and we talk about it, and we decide.
A role you were involved in.
I am on the advisory council. Mm-hmm. Along with Sean Walker is the lead of that, John Galloway, and it's split.
The new director. Yeah.
You could read the whole bylaws, but it's split between community members and Microsoft people, and so I had to sit on the other side of the table when I joined Microsoft. But one of the things that we are very adamant about, both from inside and outside Microsoft, is anything that goes into the foundation, that's not a way to make abandonware. Right. It's like, we prototyped this. It was kind of cool, but we're not supporting it open source.
There you go. Yep.
That will not happen.
Yeah.
So some of our gates are, Carl knows this, working through with AppFiNext. Who's leading this? Who are your active maintainers? Yeah. What is your plan and your roadmap and so on? It has to have a life. Okay?
Right. Yeah.
But it can have a life without... C# could continue to have a life even if everybody agreed, right, it's done now, and people can continue to write great apps in C#.
Sure.
Even it could be done as a language, and there can still be improvements to Roslyn, maybe making it faster or whatever it is.
Security constraints. I mean, that the idea that there wouldn't be a flow of new features.
Right. Yeah. So there's that first part that says that.
Now, how do we contend with that issue around the foundation, feeling that it's healthy, even if we don't have a huge backlog of features?
Now, that's actually one of the other things that we talk about. There are things that are, what new features do you add, right? Mm-hmm. So we thought about this pretty carefully, and that one of the things that was originally in the list of, are you going to take this in, was, there's active PRs over the last 6 months at some rate we'll come up with. And we decided that was a really bad idea because some projects just are mature. You'll get a few bug fixes and so on, but there's no need to go, boom, here's a whole new thing.
Yeah, if you're not turning out 12 of these a quarter, we don't consider you
functioning. And there can be spikes of activity. I know from Notatime, which is largely just me, not entirely, but largely just me, there will be spikes of activity when I'm not writing C# in depth.
Right. So this has got more to do with your work schedule than anything else. Where I could also see on other projects is when a major security build comes out, there is a flurry of work to make sure you're protected from those particular
Do you think people might have been busy recently with Meltdown?
I'm just thinking a little bit.
Maybe a bit.
Teeny little problems.
And there's spikes to react to other things. We've been really happy with people adding .NET Core support and moving to .NET Standard and so on and so forth. But, and that's... So we want things alive enough that those things are going to happen.
Sure. And there could be other platforms being added, that kind of thing.
So that's the first part. Now, the second part then is we want C# to stay relevant. So does that mean and it is a balance.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting.
And I think Mads has often said, every new feature starts with minus 1,000 points because it's work, it's changing the language, it's backward compatible complexity.
And it's potential future complexity. I think one of the things, one of the points I wanted to make in my talk yesterday and ran out of time with in terms of understanding the impact of decisions is when you're designing a language, you need to understand that every new feature you add is potentially going to conflict or interact with every feature you haven't yet imagined.
Right. Yeah.
So, designing a language to start with is playing 2-dimensional chess.
Yeah.
And then adding another feature is 3-dimensional chess. And then adding another feature is 4-dimensional chess. And if you look at overload resolution, I've mentioned before that the spec is currently inaccurate. The standard is differently inaccurate. Yeah. And we have tried to fix it. It's around, there are bits of the spec that says, if the number of arguments you've passed isn't the same as the number of parameters, then overload resolution fails. Well, optional parameters?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, looks like we forgot to fix that up. Okay, this should be oh no, but then.
Yeah.
And it's really, overload resolution seems to be the nexus of all possible problems.
It is the biggest
coded.
area.
This stuff exists and works.
Oh, yeah.
You just need to do a bunch of empirical research to actually figure out how it functions.
If we could have some way of extracting Eric Lippert's comments in Roslyn.
There's a search there. If you look for, I think it's either spec deviation. There's something like that where every time he implemented something that was in Roslyn that had to be compatible with the pre-Roslyn compiler but didn't match the spec, he put a comment there.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they are findable. I can't remember the exact phrase right now.
To do this isn't quite right.
No, it's
probably a page of comments explaining exactly why it's
got
this
the
way.
section, it's got everything in there, and
it's Eric Lippert.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
He is
hats
specific.
off to the guy.
And he was pretty adamant with it. He's like, we thought when we were doing this, it might get open source, so I was trying to be really thorough in all those things.
Just aware of those aspects.
Yeah.
My concern always is if somebody's been involved in software for several decades, is like you keep adding features because that's how you made money, until you run out of good ideas,
and then you keep adding them anyway.
Then you get into bad ideas because bad ideas give you two versions: one where you put it in, and one where you take it out. Right? Like that's actually very profitable. But we're now in an open source world,
and talking about people who've been around for a long time, and we know that we need to keep learning. So you're talking about keeping the language relevant. How about keeping people relevant? We know that people will have to keep learning all kinds of other things. Maybe we could take the burden off learning new language features.
Right. And there's other places to go, right? We certainly could be going across more platforms. We certainly could be building better test harnesses. We certainly could be building abstractions for simplification. Like there's many possibilities there if the underpinning pieces weren't shifting steadily.
None of which is to say it's a bad idea to add stuff. It's just the bar is really high.
And I think I just question the ongoing value proposition.
Well, so let's put the features in a couple different buckets.
Okay.
And so the point releases now are getting these small little fixes to things, which they have a few interesting, nice properties. In general, ref stuff is a little bit different. In general, they're pretty small in scope. They don't affect major parts of the language like touching overload resolution or so on. Right, type in, inferring tuple member names doesn't hit a lot of places because there's only a couple different declarations where that'll happen, and it's scoped to when they are tuples and when the names are this and so on. It's pretty focused. Async main, really focused. There's one spot where that's going to hit. Now, if you look at the major number releases, Anders has often said, my team builds your productivity, right? That's our product. So if you look at the one feature that's been demoed for C# 8 is the idea of non-nullable reference types. And adding that, there are languages that already have that feature, but it was baked in from day one.
Right.
Adding non-nullable reference types to C# with all the body of code that's out there and really thinking about where is that right spot between this is so benign that you don't really see the warnings that we really want you to see, or so hits you in the head that you get the new compiler. Yeah, well, or if let's say we just turned everything on and now every reference is non-nullable, you're going to get screens full of error messages the first time you try the compiler and nobody uses it. So how do you design the language feature and the intelligent static analysis to look at where you were using these variables to go, this is or isn't null, and get it close enough that the actual warnings you get are small enough in number that you go, I'm going to turn this on because this is fixing bugs.
Sure.
Right.
And where it's telling me stuff, those are real bugs.
They're worth looking at.
Right.
Yeah. They're not just overwhelming.
And that's and as Mads has put in his design notes, there are billions of lines of code out there that are already tested against null. We don't want to warn you about those. You've got guard clauses around them.
Yep.
We want to find the ones you didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in big language features, I think what we're going to see is to continue to work for something that's a really big win, that really changes the way you write code every day.
And I'm fairly satisfied that the team is really working hard to make sure that it is a big win and it's done right.
Right.
So one of the features that might be in C# 8, we have seen before because it was slated to be in C# 6 and then maybe C# 7 of record types. But because the team weren't happy enough, it's clearly a potentially big win feature. But unless you get it right, then it's going to cause more problems.
Well, briefly, can you describe what a record type is?
Record types, this actually was one of the features that I requested in my C# 5 talk, was I love anonymous types. They give me immutability equals to string. They're great, but they're anonymous. I want named anonymous types. So all the benefits of anonymous types, but with
is a
names.
name, exactly.
Exactly. And a record type is basically that. So you say, I want a record type of person with first name, last name, and strings.
Oh, I see.
And then it generates all the boilerplate garbage for you.
So the proposed syntax you would say class, person, open paren, string, first name, comma, string, last name, close paren, semicolon, and that generates the whole class with all the stuff you think is going to be in there.
Yeah, okay.
Nice.
Okay, so cool. And this gets to where we were talking about, where these larger features touch more parts of the language. Now, just from that description, people are immediately going, this is cool.
Yeah, I love it.
A lot of stuff I
More
don't
of
have to type. All right, now what happens if I derive from person?
Yeah, right.
Right. What happens if I want to make person sealed?
Yeah.
What happens if I want to derive a type with behavior from person? What happens if I suddenly now have a lot of behavior I want to add?
How do I evolve
this person record type into a class so I can add new methods in it? So all of these things get into a very hard question of, is this the right syntax? What if person should implement an interface? What if it's derived from something else?
What if you just don't let people do that? I mean, you can't, kind of, right?
And then it gets to, as John says, well, now that's a nice feature, except it's really not that useful.
Yeah, it doesn't
Right.
evolve.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we're going to do it, make it so it really is big.
I don't want to leave tonight without talking about the humanitarian toolbox, because we have, two big guys who actually are very involved in it, Richard and Bill.
Some of us are bigger than others.
Some bigger than others. Yeah. I used to be huge. Bill, tell us briefly tell everybody what it is and then what you guys are doing.
All right. So Humanitarian Toolbox is a charity registered in the United States that enlists developers to help us build software to support disaster relief and disaster preparedness organizations. Steve Gordon, one of the people who really helps us with Already projects, is in the front row. Thank you, Steve, for all your hard work on Already, along with James Chambers, who's in Canada, probably, doing his Canadian things now. And lots of other continents.
Canadian things?
Canadian things.
Really?
Yeah.
But curling, playing hockey, being cold.
Yes. So we're doing a lot of things there. The application that's had the most work is Already, which helps any charity run a preparedness campaign. So find everybody in a certain zip code, make sure they have smoke detectors, or make sure they're prepared for a power outage or whatever it may be. And the Red Cross in Chicago has used it and piloted it a couple times. We're going to be adding other charities. We're actively looking for other charities that run those kind of campaigns. So instead of just asking developers in the audience, do you want to help write code? If there's a charity that you are really passionate about that runs campaigns where you need to know geography and you need to know to reach people in a certain area to make something happen, shoot us an email and we'll try to link up the charity with the software and make them more efficient. That's really what we want to do.
Yeah. And what was your role, Mr. Campbell, in getting this thing off the ground?
Well, you were there, my friend. when we were planning the 2012 road trip in the summer of 2012, the organizer group we were working with asked us to make sure there was a charitable component to our tour.
Right.
And if I had had any sense at all, I would have said, hey, match us dollar for dollar for United Way. But instead, I rant on a rant, as I am prone to doing at time to time, about how difficult it was for software developers to contribute their skills to charity. And I knew great developers that had picked a charity that mattered a lot to them and had committed dozens, if not hundreds of hours of time to building things. Because we all know that software is not just writing software, that it's collecting requirements and it's figuring out what people actually need and testing things and maintaining it and doing tech support and all of the complexities therein. And I think most volunteer developers, they're responsible enough to not do it because they know the scope of the commitments actually necessary. And could we build an organization that would take that piece off the table? That would say, if you've got an hour that you could spend on our software or a day that you could spend on our software, that's a valuable, a useful contribution. You can make a meaningful difference there, and don't worry about the rest. We'll do the rest.
Yeah.
And so that was really sort of the vision around that particular piece, was that there's this great untapped need. I think people want, not every piece of software you write for your job delights you. That can
speak for yourself.
Yeah, can be particularly meaningful, and so the opportunity to write software that saves lives, that has that impact, that you can choose on your own time in your own way and be part of a larger piece of action. You know, our experience working on the podcast and talking to people all over the world, often the only developer in the room, only developer they get to see every day, that the podcast is their contact with the rest of the world. Well, now we've met some of those developers contributing to our projects that have been parts of literally hundreds of developers contributing to a project, so that they are part of a larger whole that they might not be able to get other ways.
And these developers are all over the world, and they check in things. You can go to GitHub and what is it, htbox.org, and just.
And so one thing we're doing now, the show will probably come out early enough to at least still get people driving toward that, is we're working with Microsoft's MVP program. They've been very, very supportive of us over the years. Myself as a former MVP and RD, Richard as well, we're driving toward trying to get people from as many different regions in the MVP program helping us out with the software. So
that's great.
If you're an MVP listening, contact your manager, your community manager, what do they call them today? And we've got volunteers who are helping in different regions. You know, one thing we hope to get from this, since we started in North America, reaching places all around the world, I am almost certain our software isn't localized very well.
No.
I think that would be a
Pretty
safe bet.
Right.
We want to be able to help people all around the world. We can't do that if it's only in English. So we'd love to get help from people in other parts of the world that can help us internationalize the software.
You guys doing a hackathon while you're here?
We did not this time. You are.
So we weren't able to organize it here, but through the graces of Steve Gordon and Mag Dex, we are actually doing something on Saturday. So I'm staying over for the weekend. We'll take off on Friday night and head down there to Brighton, which I've never been to, so I'm excited to see it. And get to spend a day with I think it's sold out. It's a group of developers very excited to contribute. And so we'll have some fun and write some code. We've got a good stack of work items here. Again, you know, you talk about the plumbing part of running a good project is getting it organized so that there's work items that people can pick up and contribute so that you could get to delivering a useful pull request in a day.
Right. And that's what I love. So I haven't contributed to Humanitarian Toolbox.
No, but I pulled you in.
There are things. Yeah, I've been involved in no time discussions and things. But what I love about it in concept is that it's not delivering a product, it's delivering a toolbox.
Yes.
And that it has to be sustainable, because there's nothing worse than, hey, someone's built this awesome product and then they have either lost interest in it or they just can't do it with other commitments.
It's curated.
All that value is gradually lost.
That's still, if I can tell that story, just to embarrass you a little.
Oh,
we're working at this.
One of my favorites.
And we're doing this thing, and one of the developers is going to implement Node at time because we're having time zone issues, and Node at time works, and it just does that, and he gets partway down, and he's stuck. And I think you contacted John.
But there was sort of this conversation going on in the Slack channel about the complexities in Node at time, and they were trying to work it out. And I said, would it help if we could ask Mr. Skeet about it?
And all of a sudden, you see this thing. at the bottom of the channel, because not everybody's in the same room. John Skeet just entered the room. And then there's this question, and he just starts answering.
I think you spent a good hour with them that time, John. Yeah, it was a while.
It was quite and
then he put his cape back on and flew away. And the other guys on the Slack channel were like, was that John Skeet? Yes, that was John Skeet.
See, that was really John Skeet? Yes,
but the embarrassing part is that's a failure. If I needed to be somewhere...
I knew you thought that way.
Then that's clearly a failure in Noda-Time's documentation and all
and there was a conversation I had after the fact with a number of the developers. They're like, well, how is this possible? It's like, you know the service you did to John to show him the challenges of this tool that he loves, that a developer picked it up from scratch, hit this wall. So he learned today as much as he taught today. Yeah. So, it's all mutually beneficial, and it helps.
Absolutely.
Kind of helps that I have your phone number. Well, it was great. It was a very funny moment.
It was fun.
Let's give these guys a big hand for the humanitarian toolbox.
Thank you.
And let's also thank John Skeet and Bill Wagner for being our guests tonight. And we'll see you next time on .NET Rocks! .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Pwop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.